When the security alarm rang at 4:47 in the morning, I already knew who was standing outside the gates. I was sitting in the kitchen of my oceanfront home in Carmel, California, holding a cup of hot coffee and watching the first rays of the sun touch the water. My security guard, Tom, called me a few seconds later. His voice was trembling. "Mrs. Harper, I'm sorry to bother you so early, but we have a problem." I calmly set my cup on the table. "What happened, Tom?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Your daughter-in-law is here." I didn't say anything. I just looked at an old photograph on the wall. It was my husband, James. He was smiling, holding our son, Michael, who was only 10 years old at the time. My boy. The very boy I raised alone after my husband's death. The very boy for whom I worked 12 hours a day. The very boy who is now standing on the other side of my door. "She didn't come alone," Tom continued. "She has movers with her. A big truck. She says this house belongs to her now." I closed my eyes, not out of fear, but out of disappointment, because at that moment I realized everything I had been waiting for over the last few months had finally happened. She made her move, and that was exactly what I wanted. "How many people are with her?" I asked calmly. "4 movers, and some man with a folder of documents." I smiled. "Open the gates." Tom went silent. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harper." "What?" "Open the gates, Tom." "But she is trying to take your house." I looked at the ocean outside the window, at the house I bought with my own hands, at the place where I spent the best years of my retirement. "Let her in." "Are you sure?" I took a sip of my coffee. "More than sure." I hung up the phone and, for the first time in a long while, allowed myself to smile. Because my daughter-in-law, Victoria, had made one huge mistake. She decided that a quiet, elderly woman was a weak woman. She didn't know that in my 70 years of life I had learned one simple thing. The most dangerous people are not those who scream loudly. The most dangerous are those who remain silent and prepare. My name is Evelyn Harper. I am 70 years old. I was an accountant for almost 45 years. I spent my whole life working with numbers, documents, and people who tried to hide the truth. And if my profession taught me anything, it was this: papers do not forget. Signatures do not disappear. And lies always leave a trail. But before I tell you why my own family tried to steal my house, you must understand how it all began. Because this is not a story about money. It is a story about betrayal. About how a person you love more than anything in the world can one day look at you and see not a mother but an obstacle. I bought this house 7 years ago. After retiring. After 45 years of work. After the day when I finally told myself, "Evelyn, now you can do something for yourself." My husband, James, died 9 years before that. A heart attack. One moment the person is right next to you. A few minutes later, they are gone. After his death, the whole world changed. But I still had Michael, my only son. He was 34 years old then, just starting to build his career. I helped him in every way I could. Paid for his education. Supported him. Helped him buy his first home. I never regretted it, because when you are a mother, you don't count how much you give to your child. You just give. When Michael introduced me to Victoria, I wanted to be happy. She was beautiful, confident, knew how to talk. She always knew just what to say. When she first came to my house, she brought flowers. "Evelyn," she said, smiling, "I've heard so much about you. Michael says you are the strongest woman he knows." I smiled. What mother doesn't want to hear that? I wanted to believe her. I really did. But after living for 7 decades, you begin to notice the little things. The way someone looks. The questions they ask. The things they are most interested in. And Victoria looked at me far too rarely. She looked at my house. At my paintings. At the furniture. At the things that told the story of my life. One day, she asked, "Evelyn, have you ever thought about what will happen to this house later?" I smiled. "Of course. I have the documents. Everything is organized." She smiled back, but her eyes changed. "It's good that you've planned ahead." At the time, I didn't think much of it, but now I understand. That was the first warning sign. 2 years after Michael and Victoria's wedding, everything began to change. My son started calling less often. Then he stopped coming over. Then our conversations became brief. "Mom, I'm busy." "Mom, we have plans." "Mom, Victoria thinks we need more personal space." Personal space. A strange phrase, because I used to be the person he called first. When he felt bad. When he needed help. When he was happy. And now, I became the person who was in the way. But the most painful moment came on my 68th birthday. I had cooked dinner. His favorite dish? Rosemary chicken. I bought his favorite pie. I waited. An hour. 2, 3. Then I received a text. Mom, sorry. We can't make it. Victoria has an important meeting. I stared at my phone screen for several minutes, and then I simply turned off the kitchen light. That evening, I realized I had lost my son before he even left. A few months later, Victoria spoke about my money for the first time. It happened over dinner. She held a glass of wine and smiled. Evelyn, have you ever thought about simplifying your asset management? I looked at her. What do you mean? Well, you aren't 40 anymore. Michael looked down at his plate. I noticed that. He heard her, but he remained silent. I am managing just fine, I replied. Of course, she said quickly. We're just worried. We. I heard that word more and more. Not I. We. Her and Michael, and it was as if I was someone on the outside. Michael is your only child, Victoria continued. Doesn't it make sense to give him more control? I set my fork down. Victoria, my son will get everything he is entitled to. She smiled. After your death? That phrase sounded so cold that I felt everything freeze inside me. Not after your life. Not someday down the road. After your death. At that moment, I understood. She wasn't waiting for the future. She wanted the present. The next day, I called my lawyer, Robert Miller. He had worked with our family for over 20 years. When I told him everything, he was silent for a long time. Then he said, Evelyn, you need to prepare. For what? For your family trying to do what many people do when they see someone else's assets, which is declare you incompetent. I felt a chill. They might try to prove that I can't make decisions on my own? Yes. I looked at my hands. The hands of a woman who had spent 45 years auditing other people's financial statements. A woman who raised a child on her own. A woman who had never asked for help. And then I said, fine. Fine? I opened my notebook. Let them try. I wasn't going to fight by screaming. I wasn't going to yell. I was going to do what I did best. Gather evidence. Because Victoria thought she was playing with a weak old woman, but she didn't know she was dealing with someone who had spent her entire life finding errors in other people's calculations. And her biggest mistake had already been made. After that conversation with Robert, I changed only one thing. I stopped trying to get the old Michael back. I stopped calling first, stopped asking why he had distanced himself, stopped making excuses for Victoria. Because sometimes, the most painful realization in life is that you cannot force someone to see the truth. You can only wait for the moment when the truth knocks on their door itself. And I knew that moment would come. People like Victoria always make the same mistake. They become too confident. They begin to believe their own lies. And then they stop being careful. 3 weeks after my talk with the lawyer, Victoria called me. She didn't text. She didn't ask Michael to do it. She called herself. This immediately seemed suspicious to me. Evelyn, dear, she said in her softest voice. How are you feeling? I was sitting on the porch of my house, looking at the garden. The very garden James and I had planted 20 years ago. I'm fine, Victoria. I'm so glad to hear that. She paused. Little too long. I knew that tone. It's how people talk when they are about to ask for something big. Michael and I were thinking. That word again. About what? About your future. I slowly set my cup on the table. My future? Yes. Surely you understand that one day it will be harder for you to handle all these matters on your own. I looked at the ocean. Interesting. Not long ago, I was a mother to them. Now, I was a problem to be solved. Victoria, I am managing my affairs perfectly well. Of course. We don't doubt that. But she did doubt it. I could hear it. We just wanted to suggest an option that would be more convenient for everyone. What option? She took a breath. To hand over the management of the house to Michael. I closed my eyes. There it was. Finally, Victoria, this house will remain mine. Silence fell over the line. And then her voice changed. Just a little. But I heard it. Evelyn, you are misunderstanding the situation. No. I understand it very well. We are just trying to help. Help does not require transferring property. She went quiet, and for the first time in a long time I heard the real Victoria. Not the beautiful woman with the perfect smile, but a person who gets angry when she is denied. Are you really prepared to leave everything to Michael only after your death? I felt pain, not from her words, but because my son had allowed her to think this way. Yes, even if he needs support right now. What kind of support? She didn't answer. Because the answer was obvious. She needed my money. A month later, What I expected finally happened. They came together. Michael looked tired. Victoria looked perfect. She always looked perfect. Expensive clothes. Impeccable hair. A calm smile. They entered the house. I offered them coffee. Michael sat across from me. He avoided my gaze. "Mom, we need to talk." I nodded. "Of course." Victoria pulled out a folder. My heart froze, but outwardly I remained calm. "We found a solution that will be best for everyone." She laid the documents on the table. "It's just a modification to your family trust." I took the papers. Opened the first page. It looked professional, very much so. Logo, stamps, legal jargon. But I was not an ordinary person. I was an accountant. I read documents differently. I never looked at the pretty words. I looked at what was hidden between them. "Who prepared these documents?" I asked. Victoria smiled. "A lawyer friend of ours. A very good specialist." "His name?" She hesitated slightly. "Thomas Reed." I noted the name in my mind. "And what exactly am I supposed to sign?" Michael finally looked up. "Mom, it's just to make life easier." I looked at him. "For you?" He said nothing, and that moment spoke louder than any words. I asked for a few days to think about it. Victoria was confident that I had basically agreed. When they left, I immediately called Robert. They came. What did they bring? Documents. I heard him grow serious. "You didn't sign, did you?" "No." "Good." I sent him copies. 2 days later, he called back. His voice was cold. "Evelyn." "Yes?" "You were right." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "What's in there?" "It's not a trust modification." Pues. It's a transfer of ownership." I closed my eyes. Even though I expected it, it still hurt. Were they trying to transfer the house to Michael's name? No. Worse, to Victoria's name. The room fell silent, so silent that I could hear the clock on the wall ticking. The woman who called me mother. The woman who sat at my table. The woman I tried to trust. Wanted to take my house, not from a stranger, from me. After that, I decided to change the plan. Before, I only wanted to protect myself. Now I wanted them to show the world who they truly were. Robert supported me. "Evelyn, sometimes the best way to defeat a liar is to let them keep talking." We prepared everything. I installed security cameras in the house. Not hidden cameras to break the law, but standard security cameras. I reviewed all my documents, made copies, updated my will, checked my accounts, created additional asset protection. But most importantly, I began recording every meeting, every conversation, every attempt to pressure me. 2 weeks later, Victoria came back, alone. That surprised me. She walked in with a smile. "Evelyn, I think we need to have a woman-to-woman talk." I let her in. She sat in the living room, looked around. I noticed that look. She was already imagining this room as her own. "You do realize Michael deserves more, don't you?" I remained silent. "He is your son." "Yes, you should think about his future." I looked at her. "And are you thinking about his future?" She smiled. "Of course." But the camera was recording, and a few seconds later, she said what she never should have said. "Evelyn, let's be honest." She leaned forward. "You've already lived your life." I felt a cold chill run through me, but my face remained expressionless. "What did you say?" "I'm saying that you need to let go of things in life on time." There it was, her true face. "The house is big. The money is plenty. Michael is young. He needs to build a family. And what about me?" She shrugged. "You don't need this much anymore." I stared at her for a few seconds, and for the first time, I didn't see an enemy. I saw a person who didn't even comprehend how cruel her words were. "Victoria, do you really think I should give you everything just because I've gotten older?" She sighed. "I think you should be reasonable." Reasonable. That is what they always call surrender, when they want you to give up what belongs to you. A week later, she made her next move. She came with a man. The man introduced himself as Thomas Reed, that very lawyer. He was around 50, gray suit, expensive watch, confident demeanor. He laid the documents on the table. "Mrs. Harper, this is standard procedure." I looked at him. "Have you worked with Victoria for long?" He smiled. "Long enough." A lie. I knew it, because Robert had already run a check on him, and what we found was exactly what I had been waiting for. Thomas Reed was not a successful lawyer. He was a former paralegal, fired for violating professional ethics. But Victoria didn't know that, or she thought no one would find out. She placed a pen in front of me. "Evelyn, just sign." I looked at the documents, then at her. "Fine." She froze. She hadn't expected this. "Really?" I nodded. "Yes." A victorious smile spread across her face. She didn't even try to hide it. This was exactly what I had been waiting for. She thought she had won. But she didn't know one thing. I wasn't signing away my rights. I was signing her confession, because before putting pen to paper, I had done something else. I had turned on the recording, and I asked one question. Victoria, just so I understand correctly. She smiled. Of course, after this signature, this house becomes yours? She didn't even hesitate. Yes. I looked at Thomas. And you confirm that this is a legal transfer of ownership? He nodded. Yes. Those were the exact words I needed. Because in a few days, Victoria was going to show up at my house, not to talk, not to ask, but to take it. And that was when she would learn that her greatest victory was just the beginning of her downfall. 7 days after Victoria walked out of my house with a winner's smile, I was sitting on the very same porch, where I drank coffee every morning, where, many years ago, James had proposed to me, where I had experienced the happiest and the most difficult moments of my life. Only now, I wasn't sitting there as a woman afraid of losing everything. I was sitting there as someone who already knew the end of the story. Because sometimes, life gives you an incredible opportunity. It allows the person who wants to destroy you to build their own trap. You just have to stay out of their way. That day, Victoria sent me a message. Evelyn, we'll be at the house tomorrow. We need to start moving things. I looked at the phone screen. No requests, no questions. She already considered the house hers. I replied briefly, fine, just one word, but it was the word that made her believe I had surrendered. She didn't know that at that exact moment, I had already sent a message to Robert. She is coming. 5 minutes later, he replied, then it's time to end this. The next morning at 4:47 a.m., the alarm went off. And that is where the story I began with truly started. The truck was at the gate. 4 men with boxes. Victoria in an expensive coat. Thomas Reed with a folder of documents. She looked as though she had come not to take someone else's house, but to receive a well-deserved prize. I watched her through the window. She walked around the property, directing the movers on where to put things. Careful with the furniture in the living room, she was saying. This is all mine now. Mine now. Those words hit me harder than I expected. Not because she wanted the house, but because she truly believed she had the right to take the years of my life. The photographs, the memories, my things, my story. She thought it was just square footage. But to me, it was my entire journey. I went downstairs, slowly, taking my time. When I opened the door, Victoria saw me. Her face changed, for a split second. Then she smiled again. Evelyn, she said it as if we were meeting for a regular family dinner. Good morning. Good morning, I replied. She looked around. I'm glad you're here. Really? Of course. I wanted everything to go smoothly. I looked at the movers. You brought people to take my things away. She smiled. Our things. I said nothing. And that was when she made her first mistake. She decided to explain. Evelyn, I understand this is hard for you. But documents are documents. She pulled out the folder. Thomas stepped forward. Mrs. Harper, according to the signed agreement, ownership has been transferred. I looked at him. Are you sure? He nodded confidently. Absolutely. I smiled. Good. He frowned. Good? Yes. And at that moment, a car appeared outside the gates. Then a second one. Victoria looked over. Her smile vanished, because Robert stepped out of the car, and next to him was a woman in a sharp suit, and a man with a badge. Evelyn? Victoria whispered. I turned to her. I think it's time to meet the people who actually know the law. The woman showed her ID. My name is Sarah Collins. I represent the Financial Crimes Investigation Department. Victoria's face turned white. What? Robert walked up to me. Evelyn, everything is ready. I nodded. Sarah looked at Victoria. Ms. Miller? Yes. We need to talk about the documents you provided. She laughed nervously. I don't understand. You do. The woman opened a folder. The documents you used to transfer the property were obtained through misrepresentation. Thomas started to speak. This is a mistake. My client simply. Robert cut him off. Your client? He looked at him. Interesting. What? Because we have documents proving that you had no legal right to draft such agreements. Thomas went silent. Victoria turned to him. What does he mean? But he was no longer looking her in the eye. And then she understood. She had used a person who had also deceived her. Robert pulled out a folder. Evelyn, show them. I opened it. Inside were copies of all the documents. The real documents, the real trust, the real ownership. Everything was registered to me. This house never belonged to Victoria, I said calmly. Sarah looked at the documents. Then why was she so sure she owned it? I looked at Victoria. Because she said so herself. That was when Robert turned on the recording. My television screen turned on, and Victoria appeared on the screen. That very living room. That very conversation. Her voice. You've already lived your life. You don't need this much anymore. After the signature, the house becomes mine. Victoria stared at the screen. Her face grew more and more terrified. But that wasn't the end. Another recording played. She was talking to Thomas. How fast can we sell the house? His voice. Once it's processed, we can start looking for a buyer. Her reply. Great. I need to pay off my debts. Silence. Complete silence. Even the movers stopped moving. Victoria looked at me, for the first time without a smile. Without a mask. Without pretense. You knew the whole time? I looked her in the eyes. Yes. You let me think I won? Yes. She laughed. But it wasn't a laugh. It was the sound of a person who realized they had lost. You're crazy. I shook my head. No, Victoria. I took a step forward. I just finally stopped being convenient. An hour later, Michael arrived. Robert had called him. I didn't want him to hear about this from anyone else. When he walked into the house, he stopped. He saw the investigators. He saw the documents. He saw Victoria. What's going on? He looked at her. Victoria? She immediately changed, as always. Michael, this is a misunderstanding. But for the first time, her words didn't work. Because my son saw everything. Robert showed him the documents, then the recordings, then the messages. Yes. We had those too. Victoria's texts to her sister. She needs to be convinced. She is too trusting. Once we get the house, everything will be easier. Michael stared at the screen. I saw his world crumbling. Not because of the house. Because of the truth. Is this true? He asked quietly. Victoria said nothing. I asked, is this true? And then she said the thing that shattered everything completely. So what? Everyone looked at her. So what? She repeated. Your mother has millions. We are family. This was all going to be ours anyway. Michael slowly backed away, as if she had hit him. You used me. I was helping you. No. His voice trembled. You used me against my mother. She tried to step closer, but he stopped her. Don't come near me. Those words were more terrifying than any scream, because for the first time, my son saw her for who she truly was. Victoria was prosecuted. The investigation went on for several months. Many things came to light. Debts, hidden loans, previous issues, people to whom she had promised one thing and done another. She lost more than just the house. She lost everyone's trust. But the most severe consequence was not that. She lost the person she had manipulated the most, Michael. My son didn't change in a day. Life doesn't work that way. Apologies don't erase years of pain. He started seeing a therapist. Began trying to understand why he had allowed another person to make decisions for him. He started visiting me, at first, once a week, then more often. One day, he was sitting in my kitchen, and he said, Mom, yes? All this time, I thought I was protecting my family. He looked down, but in reality, I lost it. I placed my hand on his. Sometimes people get lost. What if they've been lost for too long? I smiled. Then they just need more time to find their way back. A year has passed. I still live in my house by the ocean. I still drink coffee on the porch every morning. But I look at this house differently now. I used to think a house was just walls. Now I understand. A home is a place where your heart is at peace, where you are not used, where you are valued, where you can be yourself. I am 70 years old. My hands are not as strong as they used to be. My hair has turned gray. My steps have slowed down. But inside me, there is something no one can ever take away. Dignity, memory, and the knowledge that justice doesn't always arrive quickly. Sometimes it takes months, sometimes years, but if you stand on the truth, it always comes. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where someone tries to make you feel small, just because you've gotten older, remember my story. Age does not make a person weak. Experience makes them stronger, and the quiet confidence of someone who knows the truth can be the most powerful weapon in the world.